sorry. We will let all of you speak. Senator Harris. Senator Harris. Please, we will let you all speak. Senator Harris.
We can't afford to wait for evolution on these issues.
Hey, guys, you know what? America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table. Yes.
Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. Sorry, folks, but that clip just cracks me up because as much people want to criticize Kamala Harris for some of the stuff as Attorney General in California, her intervention last night showed how last night's Democratic debate was more intense and more contentious than the first, by a long shot. Some of the issues that are gripping our body politic, like race and racism, the debate over socialism and capitalism, how we really define Medicare for all, what do we do about immigration and issues of war and peace, took front and center in last night's debate, as did the generational divide. So, to sort some of this out, we have with us today once again Dr. Kimberly Moffitt, who rejoins us this morning. Good to have you, Kimberly, here.
Thank you.
Kimberly Moffitt is the Associate Professor and Chair of Language, Literacy, and Culture Doctoral Program at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Jacqueline Lookman, who is a Real News correspondent and Editor-in-Chief of Lookman Nation. And Jacqueline, welcome. Good to have you as well.
Thank you for having me.
So that was really, that really kind of stunned me when I saw that. It reminded me of somebody's mother saying, you know, just stop. Will you? Stop.
Yes.
Pass the peas and stop. So, but in all seriousness, though, that kind of set the tone for the evening, I think.
Did.
And set, not that I want to make this a conversation about a horse race, because those, I think, are irrelevant sometimes. But I think her doing that near the top really did set the tone for the evening and set her as the centerpiece for the evening.
Indeed, indeed. I would say that it demonstrated a level of confidence to be in command and know how to rally the troops, so to speak. So she made a clear indication that she can play this role and she knows how to carry out the role. And she did so continuously through the night, even with some of the language she used when she referred to herself as the next president, when she said when she becomes the next president. All of those cues made it very clear that she was situating herself to be that next person.
Jacqueline, you want to jump in on that for a minute?
Yes, I absolutely agree. Kamala Harris made clear that she is not easily intimidated by a room full of loud talking politicians. So she literally had her "don't make me come back there" moment. Positioning herself as the adult in the race, really. And we're not even talking about her policies right now. We're just talking about the way she branded herself, marketed herself to the American people in that debate. And as a strategy, as a tactic, going forward to 2020, she really did a great job doing that.
I would also add to that I think it was the beginning of her showing the so-called human side of who she is, because much of the commentary that's been made about her previously shows her as this very stoic, kind of distant, not engaging, but very serious about her ability to carry out tasks. And what she did throughout the night for us was offer a number of stories that gave us a sense of her human side.
Let's look at this other clip. This is Marianne Williamson, the author and spiritualist, who, when she made this comment on reparations, opened up a bag of worms that also, I think, defined the evening. Let's look at this.
All of these issues are extremely important, but there are specifics, there are symptoms, and the underlying cause has to do with deep, deep, deep realms of racial injustice, both in our criminal justice system and in our economic system. And the Democratic Party should be on the side of reparations for slavery for this very reason. I do not believe that the average American is a racist, but the average American is woefully undereducated about the history of race in the United States.
So we won't talk a lot about Williamson at the moment, but I mean, she threw in some barbs during the course of the whole evening that really, not barbs, she stated some points during the course of the evening that I think really kind of broadened and deepened the discussion that politicians don't usually have, and she did it this time with reparations. And that this piece led to this interchange between Biden and Harris on busing, states' rights, and more. Then we'll pick up our conversation.
And I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden. To hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. The fact is that in terms of busing, you would have been able to go to school the same exact way because it was a local decision made by your city council. That's fine. That's one of the things I argued for, that we should be breaking down these lines.
Do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well,
I
there
did
was
not
a
oppose.
failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
So that intense exchange, I think, really defined the evening. And also, it was the first time in either of these debates when the issues of race and racism and the role of the federal government came up. And personally, I was kind of shocked to see Biden has not figured out how to answer what he did back there in the 70s. And it also showed that it was glaring when he started talking about almost states' rights, which was a shock to me.
Yes.
So to talk about your analysis, what this means, but also I'd like to hear what you both think of what this means in a larger context for this election coming up against Trump. Go ahead, Kimberly.
So there are a couple of things that come out of that. First, I so appreciated Williamson pushing some of these issues and essentially calling out seasoned politicians to say, you've had an opportunity to address these issues and it still hasn't been done. And as a result, we have done nothing as a nation but continue to inflict racial trauma upon individuals that, of course, seems to continue generations on. It's not something that happens to Harris when she's that second class of students that is bused to her public school and then it's done. You could see, even as she was talking about it, there was some emotion for her, that she was remembering those moments and how tough it was for her. So that's trauma that has continued generations since. So I really appreciated what Williamson was offering, but I think this particular exchange, I mean, there's a moment on during the debate that Harris also makes a comment. She was like, you know, as the black person on the stage, can I please respond? And so clearly she was going to make sure that race was interjected somehow to make it clear that these are issues that we do need to be dealing with. And so by virtue of her own presence and body, she did so, but also by confronting Biden in a very aggressive, in some respects, way to be able to call him to the carpet about what he had done so many decades ago. And his inability to answer was probably even more stunning to me, because after this being a news item for the week, I was certain that he would be prepared to respond and actually have a canned response that would kind of squash this. But instead, what we saw is Harris rising and being able to demonstrate how powerful powerful she could engage on these issues, while Biden, the seasoned politician who has also been our VP, seemed to stumble and fumble quite a bit.
And Jacqueline, one of the things that came out later in this as well was that the Biden campaign came out and basically said what you did, Kamala Harris, was to help Trump in what you said. That was the response that his campaign gave after the event itself took place. Jacqueline?
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the refusal of the Biden campaign and Biden himself to deal honestly with his really terrible record in regard to racial issues, with dealing with working with racists, basically. I don't know how else he would characterize these two congressmen who he worked with who were racist. They said they were racist. They said that black people were genetically inferior, were inferior to white people. These are legislators who said this about black people. So right. Biden has consistently been dishonest about his relationship with these people and his willingness to work with these people to get their agenda passed. And I think he couldn't have been any more honest in the way he stood on that stage and advocated for states' rights. Right. Than if he had just come right out and said, you know what, I really am not for federal intervention in ensuring the equal protection under the law of all American citizens. I just don't think he was more honest than we realize he was. But he was more honest than even he realizes he was. And there's really no more analysis that I think needs to be done about that. We saw who Joe Biden was or is last night. But the thing that was interesting to me is going back to Marianne Williamson really quickly. She brought up a point about racial injustice in the criminal justice system. In particular, and she brought up the issue of reparations, which wasn't addressed at all anymore last night after this exchange between Harris and Biden. And that's unfortunate. But this is just the first of many debates, so hopefully this issue will be hashed out again. Yeah, and it's complicated. It's not an easy, I understand that, but it's interesting that she brought up reparations and then it was just kind of dropped on the floor. But what was also interesting was that nobody addressed Kamala Harris on her problematic record with criminal justice issues in regard to black people. You know, Kamala Harris, yeah, she scored some points, and she was right to say what she said to Biden about his record. But that was almost like, I mean, how is Harris going to sling mud when she's the one who is locking up black mothers, putting black mothers in jail because their kids were truant from school in California, and said it was a good idea, laughed and joked about it on a video. She was the one who fought the release of someone who had been imprisoned for decades, that the Innocence Project was found to be not guilty of the crime he was convicted of. Kamala Harris fought for this person to stay in prison after he was proven to be innocent. She refused to do anything to alleviate overcrowding in prisons in defiance of, I think it was a California Supreme Court order to address the issue. Her record on on racial issues within the criminal justice system as a prosecutor is just as problematic as Joe Biden's working so well with segregationists. And it's interesting that no one addressed that with Harris.
Right. She'll have her Biden moment, or she'll be prepared for it. We'll see when that comes up. It's going to come up.
I think she will be more prepared than Biden was.
We'll see if she will. That has to be addressed, I think. Before we go to another subject, we have a lot to cover here. You wanted to say what?
Actually, I was just going to concur. I think that was a segment where there could have been some pushback, not necessarily by Biden in that segment, but by any of the other 9 candidates, where they could have addressed that very point. And I think Marianne Williamson had already done that for us by giving us a cue to say, what have you done up to this point when you know these are issues that have existed? And in terms of Harris, I think she is going to have to deal with that head on. I also think that we as voters voters need to be aware that the time in which many of these decisions are being made, whether it's Biden and the segregationists, whether it is Harris and the participation in mass incarceration, that those are systems that we have created as a nation, and they were complicit in participating in them because they were advantageous for them politically. And now that we see ourselves, after research and the amount of trauma and turmoil that has been inflicted on our nation, we're now starting to redress and figure out ways to undo some of the damage, and they're going to have to undo some of that damage of their own.
So on our way to this next segment, which we jump into, that I think was really important, both busing and mass incarceration were popular.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
With most of the people, the anti-busing
yes.
and locking people up were very
yes.
popular in this country in the period of the 80s and 90s, extremely popular.
Yes.
One of the other things that came up last night, and I think because of the Democratic Socialist positions of Bernie Sanders, there was this whole debate back and forth about what do we mean by socialism and capitalism took place with Hickenlooper and Sanders who responded, and Gillibrand. So let's watch this piece and we can comment on this.
The bottom line is, if we don't clearly define that we are not socialists, the Republicans are going to come at us every way they can and call us socialists. And if you look at the Green New Deal, which I admire the sense of urgency and how important it is to do climate change. I'm a scientist, but we can't promise every American a government job. If you want to get universal health care coverage, I believe that health care is a right and not a privilege. But you can't expect to eliminate private insurance for 180 million people, many of whom don't want to give it up.
What is your response to those who say nominating a socialist would re-elect Donald Trump?
Well, I think the responses at the polls, last poll I saw, had us 10 points ahead of Donald Trump.
The truth is, there's a big difference between capitalism on the one hand and greed on the other. And so all the things that we're trying to change is when companies care more about profits when they do about people. There need not be disagreement in the party because, in truth, we want healthy capitalism.
Thank you.
We don't want corrupted capitalism.
Thank you.
So this, I think, is a really important question. What I want to ask the two of you is, in this debate that was taking place last night, it came to the fore inside the Democratic Party. But a real honest assessment here, how this debate plays out in the general election. And I say it in this context. I say it in the context that what America is faced with, at least from my perspective, my analysis, is a white nationalist regime that has elected itself into the White House and into the executive branch, and nominating people like this to the judiciary across the country. And immigration, all the other issues that have been stumbling us perhaps into war. So how does this debate fit into the context of what is being faced in November of 2020? Jacqueline, go ahead.
I think that for the people who have taken over our government, have basically implemented a soft political coup, is what I've been calling it. This white nationalist fascist faction, they will always use this argument of socialism is bad and these people are trying to implement socialism as a way to hold on to their power, because this is a narrative that they know they can use this anti-socialist narrative in this country because Americans don't understand what socialism is. Americans don't even understand that we don't really live in a democracy as it exists right now. And Americans are also very, very wedded to the idea that capitalism is good for them, that capitalism is the American way, and it's how Americans obtain success. So these people understand the very wedded nature of this love of capitalism that Americans have. And it's largely because we are so woefully uneducated about the way the rest of the world works, and how different economic and political systems actually work very well in other countries.
But wait a minute. The question is, though, and let me just kind of push that before we have to take a break here and come to other subjects. The question is, though, I think you're right, Jacqueline, but America and American opinion is not going to change by November 2020.
That's true.
How does this play out in terms of what do you think the internal debate's going to be among the Democrats and how this fares in the fight against Trump come next year?
Well, I mean, it's actually one of the few remarks that Hickenlooper made last night that I agreed with, that as a party, that there's going to be a need to appear more centrist instead of the move and push to the left as where where Sanders would like us. And I say that because if we continue down the road of the same rhetoric regarding socialism and what it does to us, and AOC constantly being attacked for the Green Deal and any other legislation she recommends or puts forward, that it will give the perception that we don't understand what Americans want, that we don't have a sense of what Americans need, and that we are seen as the party that's out of step with what the majority of Americans are desirous of, and that will easily make a pathway for Trump to be reelected.
So very quickly here, Jacqueline, because we really have to take a break here, but to go to our next subjects. But I think that this is going to go to the heart of some of the battle that's going to be taking place with Trump, and I'm just, given that there are a number of people who declare as socialists in this country. Young people are embracing socialism, but it's not the majority of America.
Right.
And we have the Democratic Party, not the Democratic Socialist Party, or a Socialist Party of anything that can really kind of hold forth in partisan elections. So I think this debate, in some ways, it was a debate about Democrats trying to define for themselves who they are.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think the issue for me is that instead of Democrats focusing on whether or not Trump is going to call them socialists, talk about the policies that they are going to implement to help people. Okay, you have a problem with socialism? Fine. But do you also have a problem with student loan debt? This is our solution for addressing student loan debt. You can call it what you want, but are the Republicans offering to address student loan debt? Do you have a problem with minimum wage not being enough, or not having a living wage, or not even being able to find a job where you can support yourself and your family on one job and not having to work 2 or 3 gig jobs? You can call eliminating that kind of economic system and providing a living wage for one job and addressing overzealous developers and addressing gentrification so that people can afford to live off of one job. You can call that whatever you want. But if the Republicans are not offering solutions to those problems that, like Kamala Harris said, puts food on your table, then they're not your friends, whether they call Democrats socialists or not. If they have no answers for how to address the problems that people are facing in regard to not being able to afford to live in this society, then it doesn't matter what Democrats think Republicans are going to call them.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but would you have to kind of...
No.
I mean, I think that the issue here boils down to being an interesting discussion to have at some point, which is the ideas put forth by progressives and socialists are the ones that grab American people. You use the word socialism and people panic.
That's right.
I mean, I think that is where the bottom line is for the United States right now.
And so the rhetoric does matter.
The rhetoric matters.
And we have to be able to respond to that rhetoric and keep arguing the point that Jacqueline is raising of what are the programs that benefit Americans most.
So we're here with Kimberly Moffitt and Jacqueline Luckman, and we're talking about the debate last night with the Democrats, and we have another segment coming up about that, and you don't want to miss that. And I'm Mark Steiner here for the Real News Network. Take care and stay with us.